Greetings YouTube and welcome to the Blue Corner. In this video I have for you guys a Cardfight Vanguard deck profile. And it is going to be actually on something that has popped up recently and is starting to receive a little bit of attention, and that is in the form of Stride Eradicators featuring Dragonic, featuring Sweet Command Dragon here. This is based on the lists that have been popping up in Japan, and I've been testing it for the better part of the last week. I've got things I can say about this deck, and I've also got a lot of things to explain about this deck, so let's just get right down to this. This is Stride Eradicators, and it's built around getting a lot of value out of this guy, Eradicator First Thunder Draco Kid, so much that I'm in fact running two of it, as his ability allows you to potentially restand during the battle phase. It's basically a cap butler in the sense where if you meet certain conditions, you can do things. His ability is when you control a grade 3 or greater Eradicator unit, and that's the important part, grade 3 or greater, meaning if you have a G unit in play, it's counted as an Eradicator that's at grade 4. When you control a grade 3 or greater Eradicator and you retire something by an effect, you can put this guy into the soul to check the top 10 cards of your deck and superior ride an Eradicator Sweet Command Dragon. In the past, this was used as part of a bit of a wonky combo with Sparkhorn Dragon, but I never really liked the combo, as Sparkhorn by itself was not good. You had to hit it, counterblast 2 Eradicators, and he was also a 10k base, which was not really good at that time. Now, though, you have multiple ways of proccing this guy's skill, as you have a G unit that retires on hit, and it's super big, so your opponent has to PG it or not. And you have an Amber clone that retires on being boosted when it attacks the Vanguard, Generation Break 1. So you have two ways of triggering this guy that are very easy to pull off. So it makes it a lot easier to get the pseudo restand going, and thus you get more attacks off in a turn. And it's actually quite possible for you to get 3 Vanguard attacks off with a very specific field setup. And the main card you're going to be going into with this is, the star of the deck, so to speak, Eradicator Sweet Command Dragon, of which I have 1 SP, and holy crap has this guy's value gone up recently. Like, a couple weeks ago, the triple R was $1 and the SP was 8, now they're 7 and 24 respectively. So, yeah, that hype, yo. Sweet Command Dragon is not really being used for his abilities, although they do come up. He's being used as basically an extra attack. His abilities are, though, when you ride this thing, you move an Eradicator unit into the soul to retire a front or rear guard, which is, And then his limit break is Counterblast 2, Soul Blast 4. When you retire something by an effect, you may pay the cost. If you do, you draw a card, retire a unit in your opponent's front row, and gain 5k. Now, in Vanguard, you are allowed to resolve as much of the skill as possible. So, if you are able to proc this skill, but your opponent doesn't have anything to retire, you get to draw a card in 5k regardless, which does allow for some neat combos if you happen to ride this thing during battle phase and you soul charge a trigger to retire something because you opened shit and had no choice but to attack with a 10k column consisting of a draw trigger. I've done that a couple times now, and they'll be like, yeah, I'll just ignore that trigger, and then I'll ride this thing and kill something with, or I'll ride Cho-Oh and pick off their Generation Break attacker because, yeah, that happened. But, yeah, this is both your most important card and also the card you never want to see because you need this thing in the deck for it to superior ride. If you have this in your hand or damaged or whatever, then it just reduces your chance of getting the combo off. But, yeah, that's basically what Sweet Command Dragon is being used for. Is he's a pseudo-restander, kind of like what you do with Cap Butler. And then, of course, for backup Vanguard, you have your secondary restanding Vanguard, Dragonic Descendant. I don't think I need to explain what this card does. We all know what he is. He's amazing. Restanding Vanguard, forces out cards, and he's amazing during late game. Then for the last grade 3, you can run a whole bunch of techs in here. I've seen some lists with Dragonic Vanquisher. I don't like that, though, because in order to proc off your First Thunder Draco Kid skill, you have to have an Eradicator grade 3 or greater. You can't be on grade 3 or greater. So if you proc off, you can't proc off his skill with Vanquisher. So instead I'm running the copy of Tempest Bolt Dragon that I've seen in another Japanese list that this deck is based off of. And the reasoning behind Tempest Bolt is, number 1, he gains that passive 2k for every open rearguard circle. So if your opponent has an open column because they're playing against Eradicators, therefore they can't overextend, otherwise they'll just start killing things, that means that he'll gain at least 4k by himself. If you have an open rearguard slot too, then he'll be much more. So he can swing for potentially big numbers, and his limit break is sometimes relevant, where you kind of last 3, wipe the board. It sets back decks that have to commit a whole bunch of cards from their hand in order to make a push, like Aquaforce and Nova Grapplers, which is actually kind of helpful. But yeah, you won't be using him that often. He's just there for the extremely late game, where you can't exactly be using Descendant's Restand skill because you'll deck yourself out. For the grade 2s, which Narukami got a huge boost of in terms of good grade 2s, you have this guy, Demonic Dragon Berserker Shatura. And this is probably the card that a lot of people are going to hate after the next set drops, because it's just so good. So he has no value on Vanguard. He's an 8k vanilla when you ride it, so you never want that to happen. His true abilities, though, come from on rearguard, where this thing can only attack Vanguard, so you can't attack any rearguards, which does suck. However, when he's on rearguard, he gains a static 3k, at least during your turn, so he's an 11k attacker. And if he hits, Counterblast 1, you draw a card, and then you bind a card from your opponent's drop zone. So that's a straight up +1 and a pseudo plus in that you're taking cards away from your opponent's drop zone, and that's a new gimmick that the Narukami deck gets, is the ability to mess with your opponent's drop zone. It's really anti-meta-ish, and the fact that he's drawing you cards, in addition to being a beater, means that every Narukami deck now no longer has to run 12k attackers like Dusty Plasma Dragon or Generation Break attackers. There's no need to run those things when you have this guy that's going to be swinging at the Vanguard, and he's either going to hit and draw you a card, or your opponent's going to block it with a 10k, because 11 is a nice magic number. So if you have a 5k behind it, like a Rising Phoenix, then that's 16,000, so they need a 10 to block it. So he will always be generating card advantage for you. Either you get card advantage or you take away card advantage. And things that are worth binding these days, well, let's see, we have Legion Mates, which obviously your opponent doesn't want to lose, or Legion units. Like if your opponent perfect guarded, or you kill a Legion Mate that they called early and you bind it, that sets them back a bit. PGGs, otherwise known as unflipping perfect guards, those need to be in the drop zone, you bind those, and of course triggers for Legion. So yeah, this guy's kind of really good for that. And then 4 copies of your Amber clone, Voltage Horn Dragon. Just like Amber, when this thing is Generation Break 1, when this unit attacks the Vanguard and it's boosted, you counterblast 1. Your opponent chooses a rearguard and retires it. Keyword is they choose, so this gets around resist, and that unit gets bound. So it's a nice, simple +1. Gets rid of a card for good, and it procs off voltage. It also procs off this guy's skill, which is your main combo piece. You stride, and then you attack with this thing, with this boosting it. You get his skill off, and then you use this guy's skill to potentially superior ride a Sweep Command Dragon, and then get another attack off. And yes, you can in fact superior ride over a G unit. More on that later. And then rounding it out, 3 copies of Phoenix Sword Eradicator Cho. He's just simple 1 for 1 removal. You put a unit into this. You put an Eradicator into the soul to snipe a front row rear guard. This works also on Vanguard. So in a couple of instances, as mentioned before, you could open really crappy and have no choice but to do, say, this. Let's see. What's a typical opening for me? Probably like this. So I open with a perfect guard to my opponent's perfect guard, and I end up calling a column like this. So I attack with this. They're like, yeah, I'll take that. I attack with this. They'll block or whatever. Then they'll probably attack with this 2 times, because they'll attack this 2 times because they're like, it's a 10k column. I don't care about that. What's the point? So your turn comes up, and you ride this guy. His skill activates on Vanguard or Rearguard, so you can just move this into the snow, snipe a front row Rearguard, and look at that. Your Rising Phoenix is now live. So you can just call that, Soul Blast these 2, draw a card, and you just actually went plus. So yeah, that's a thing to remember about this guy, is he works on Vanguard or Rearguard, and he's also an Eradicator name, which is helpful for Dragonic Descendant and Sweep Command Dragon. If you end up attacking with this guy, and then you ride Superior Ride Sweep Command Dragon in the battle phase, and you can just soul charge this, snipe off another front or rear guard, and proc the limit break. And speaking of perfect guards, I am in fact running them. I am running 4 copies of the Eradicator perfect guard, because Descendant, I want to make it as live as possible, and I also want to make my special counterblast as live as possible. And you don't really burn up that much counterblast. It's just like 2 per turn at most. 4 if you go for a super wombo combo play. 4 copies of the Stride Fodders, which are yeah, this is just basically my version of what's his name. I know I have one on me. Where is he? You know, yeah, screw it, whatever. You guys know what I'm talking about, though. Oh, yes, this guy. Yeah, this is the Narukami version of this guy. So when you call it on rearguard, you can search out of Vanquisher. If you have a grade 3 in hand, you discard 1. And if you stride, this counts as the entire grade 3. And seeing how you need the stride to get your combos going, I'm running this guy. 2 copies of Steel-Blooded Eradicator Shuki. When you retire a unit and you control an Eradicator Vanguard, he gains 3k. So, yeah. This just allows you to swing for some bigger numbers. And it's just a grade 1 Eradicator you can run. And finally, 2 copies of Rising Phoenix, because I tend to build up a lot of soul. And for the triggers, I am running, in fact, a ratio that you see in a lot of lists, actually. 7 crits and 5 draw, although I actually ended up putting my draw trigger elsewhere for that little example scenario. Where is he? Here we are. So yeah, 7 crits and 5 draw. I initially ran 6/6, but then I actually found myself decking out more frequently, and I don't like that, so I decided to change that around, and 4 heal triggers. Then for the extra deck, I am running 1 copy of Snow Element Blizza. His ability is Counterblast 1, Persona Flip a unit, and then he gains 5k for every face-up unit in your G-zone, so his skill will make him 10k by himself. Late game, though, this guy gets super big, because you'll have, like, all of these in your G-zone, so he'll be a nice finishing move, or he can just set up your Conquest Dragon. 3 copies of Thundering Dragonite Zoras. This is your on-hit stride unit, so no counterblast. And if he attacks and hits the Vanguard, your opponent chooses a rearguard, retires it, and then you take 2 cards from your opponent's drop zone and bind them. And that's good, because this guy can proc off this guy if you have no choice but to call it like this. So yeah, this attack, it hits, your opponent retires something, and then I bind like 2 triggers or 2 Legion units or whatever, get this guy's ability off, and potentially Superior Ride a Sweep Command Dragon. I don't know why, yeah, like that. And when you Superior Ride over a G unit, which you can do by the way, they go to the extra deck immediately. So then yeah, you just attack with him, and look at that, you got 5 drive checks in 1 turn. Pretty sick. And then I'm running 4 copies of the G unit with the Persona Flip. This is Conquest Dragon. Conquering Dragon, Conquest Dragon or something like that? I don't know. Yeah, he's a really redundant name. His ability is, once per turn, you can Persona Flip a copy of himself to choose one of your opponent's rearguards in the front row and retire it. And then, for every open front row rearguard slot that your opponent has, your front row gains 5k. So, actually, let's just set up a more ideal board. So, like this. So, if you get the skill off and your opponent has an open rearguard slot already, and then you kill something here, then they get plus 10 each. The thing I don't know is if it's all units you have in the front row currently get 10k, or all units that you have, like any other units you call. Because if it's any other units you call, and you're like, oh, well, I'll just call this guy because I drew it off my Rising Phoenix or whatever, then he gets 10k. Because if that's the case, then if you Superior Ride this off during this turn, then he would be 21. If not, then he's 11, which is unfortunate. And yeah, that's kind of it. There are some neat combos you can do with this deck. And yeah, I'll just show you them in a moment. So here's our super hypothetical board. So your turn comes, and you decide you're going to perform stride. So we will pitch something that will allow you to stride. So we'll go into Zoras, whose on-hit skill allows you to retire something. So this will be how it would go. You would attack with Vanguard first. Actually, we'll attack unboosted, as if you happen to get the effect off. Like, they're gonna either let this, they're either going to perfect guard this or let it hit. So I don't really think this matters, and it allows you to get more out of your Sweep Command Dragon. So you attack with this thing, and then if it hits or doesn't hit, it, whatever. Like if it hits, that's fine. You could potentially use this, but I would actually wait on this. So this thing attacks. Whatever happens, happens. Then this thing attacks, Generation Break 1 skill. You retire your opponent's front rear guard. You make them retire a rear guard and then bind it, which will then proc this guy's skill off. So put it into the soul, check the top 10 cards of your deck, look for a Sweep Command Dragon if at all possible, and then Superior Ride it. Now, you can in fact Superior Ride on top of G units. They just go back to the extra deck face up. And this will allow units like Pelennor and Death Rex to be really good, or whatever its name is, Dark Rex, whatever. Anyway, you've now superior ridden this guy. So now you can attack with him, and your opponent will do whatever. And that's 5 drive checks so far. And if you hit any triggers, you can stack them on this guy who's already at 11. So suppose you hit 3 triggers, so that's plus 15. So he's swinging for 26 plus this. This is 31, and if it hits, you draw a card and your opponent loses a card from their drop zone. So if it hits, that means you got 6 cards to your hand this turn. If it doesn't hit, then that means you took several cards of your opponent's hand, which is still a nice advantage. So that's one combo. Now, there's also a combo I like to refer to as the Dream. It requires you to have 4 open counterblasts and a Dragonic Descendant in play that's live, but if you can get this combo off, it's so good. So, this is how the combo would work. First, you attack with Dragonic Descendant unboosted. They'll be like, 2 pass. You'll be like, okay, check, check. You also have to have at least, you need to have 3 Eradicators in hand so that you can use a limit break. But you check, stack your trigger, put your triggers on this guy. Doesn't hit, so Descendant limit break, discard 3 Eradicators, restand. And then you swing for 18 at the Vanguard with a crit, so they'll probably PG that. And you check your 2 more cards. Then you swing with this, Generation Break 1, put into the, retire something. So they do that, proc this guy's skill off. Look at the top 10 cards of your deck for a Sweep Command Dragon, and then Superior ride it. Now, because you are at 4 damage and you have 2 open counter, well, 2 open counterblasts because Descendant's counterblast and this guy's counterblast. You've ridden this guy, so now you can put this guy into the soul, snipe a front row rear guard, and because you retired something, you get his limit break off. So Soul Blast 2, and if possible, retire something, doesn't matter. You draw a card, gain 5k, swing for 16, they block it, whatever, 2 more drive checks, and then you swing with this guy, and whatever trigger you stacked on this guy, it will require them to PG or die or whatever. And if it hits, then you get another card. So you had 2 drive checks with Descendant, 2 more drive checks with Descendant, 2 more drive checks with this guy. You drew a card off of his limit break, and then you drew another card. So that's 8, yeah, that's about roughly 8 cards in hand after that combo play. Granted, it doesn't happen that often, and it requires an extreme amount of setup, but it can still just straight up screw with your opponent. And holy crap, this video has gotten super long, so yeah, I'm just going to wrap this up here and just say that it's a very solid deck. I don't know if it's better than Brawler or Vermilion. I'd say it's probably on par with them. It's still a very good deck, though, and if you are looking forward to playing this deck, then just take my advice right now and start picking up some of these cards while they're still cheapish. Like, yeah, Sweet Command Dragons themselves have gone up a fair amount. Descendants, I think, going to start going up too. Tempest Bolt, I don't know. I don't think he won't be that expensive. You don't run more than one of it in the deck anyway. But, yeah, right now, this guy is currently sitting about like $7 Triple R and 24 SP, which is a fair bit. And all I can really say is this will probably be one of the better decks coming out of BGG2. Obviously, it won't be as good as Aquaforce or Great Nature, which I never thought I'd be saying, but the cards that Great Nature got from this set are really good. And yeah, so I'm just going to leave it here and just say, hope you guys enjoyed this video. Thank you all for watching, and remember, dragons don't die, they just simply sleep.